For over 30 years, he was a ghost, a shadow looming over South Korea. The news that the culprit behind the infamous Hwaseong Serial Murders had finally been identified wasn't just a headline, it was a shock that rattled the nation to its core. The police announced that DNA found on evidence from 3 different crime scenes matched a specific individual. The devil, who seemed to have vanished perfectly into the mist, had actually been with us the whole time. For the 6 years that the murders terrorized Hwaseong, this man stayed right there. His name is Lee Chun-jae. The nightmare began on September 19, 1986, just 1 day before the opening of the Asian Games. The first victim was a 71-year-old woman, Mrs. Lee. She had gone to the city of Suwon to sell vegetables. When she was found in a pasture, her unsold peppers were scattered around her, but the money she made from selling her other crops? Gone. At the time, no one realized this was the opening act of a tragedy that would haunt Korea for decades. Just 1 month later, the devil struck again. The victim was 25-year-old Miss Park. Unlike the first case, her clothes were stripped and there were clear signs of sexual assault. Her handbag was found near an irrigation canal, and again, her money was missing. But there was a chilling new detail. While the first victim wore socks, Miss Park wore stockings. The killer used those stockings to bind her. The knots were complex, tied tightly, a method that would soon become his signature. The victim, a 24-year-old housewife named Miss Kwon, had been missing for 130 days before she was found, reduced to skeletal remains under a red dress. She was gagged with her own girdle, and her head was covered with her underwear. Lee Chun-jae likely knew the rhythm of this neighborhood. Now we know that Chun lived and worked very close to where the first 3 cases happened. However, the 4th case broke the pattern. It happened away from his usual commute. The victim, Miss Lee, disappeared after getting off the last bus on a rainy Sunday night. When she was found a week later in a field of sesame stalks, the terror had escalated. She was bound with stockings, but the killer had also brutally assaulted her body with an umbrella. Police noted that the 3rd and 4th murders happened only 2 days apart. The first 4 cases shared 2 things: theft of money and the use of clothing as bindings. The killer was evolving. He started using knots more frequently, turning soft, stretchy stockings into efficient, deadly weapons. This was his signature, a way to exert total control. But why did he become so obsessed with this method? We found a clue in a survivor's story. Between the 2nd and 3rd murders, a woman was walking home alone when a man in his mid-20s attacked her from behind. He tried to drag her into a field and bind her with her stockings, but because stockings are elastic, she managed to struggle and escape. That failure taught him. In future attacks, he made sure to tighten the knots so securely that escape was impossible. After this failed attempt, the theft stopped. The later crime scenes still had money and jewelry left behind. His motive had shifted entirely from robbery to the pure, sadistic pleasure of controlled killing. The killings continued into 1987. The 5th victim, 19-year-old Miss Hong, was found frozen, bound with her own scarf. Up until this point, the murders were concentrated on the left side of Route 1, the main highway. So what did Lee do? He crossed the road. The 6th murder happened on the right side of Route 1. Psychological profilers call this a psychological barrier. He used the highway as a border to confuse the police. He moved back and forth, playing a game of mouse and cat. As police set up more patrols and surveillance, it seemed like murders have stopped. But soon enough, 7th victim was found after 6 months. But here, we find a disgusting detail. It was found that the murderer cut up the peaches she had bought for her husband and shoved into her private parts. The autopsy showed that she had 6 to 7 pieces of peaches in her. Interestingly, it is theorized that he got on the bus late at night afterwards. The bus driver later would give the description of what he believed the man looked like, and this was the sketch that was released to the public. Even with this effort, there was no leads. There was a long gap, over 2 years, where the killings seemed to stop. But serial killers rarely just quit. They usually pause because they are either dead or in prison. Lee Chun-jae was the latter. He was briefly jailed for robbery, but once released, the rage returned, more violent than ever. In November 1990, the 9th victim, a 13-year-old middle school girl named Kim, was found. The brutality inflicted on her body was horrific, stabbed nearly 20 times. It was as if all his suppressed rage from his time in jail exploded onto this child. Lee Chun-jae was actually on the police radar in 1987. He was questioned, but his blood type, originally tested as O, did not match the suspect's profile of B, a forensic error that allowed him to slip away. DNA technology back then simply wasn't advanced enough to catch him. Many years passed, people started to forget the Hwaseong murders. But in 2003, a film came out that depicted the case and the police's attempts to catch the killer. The film was named Memories of Murder, directed by now world-renowned director Bong Joon-ho. By the way, if you have not seen this film, go watch it. You won't regret it. Here is the last part of the film. Take a watch.
그 안에 뭐 있어요? 응? 거기에 뭐 있냐고요?
아니,
근데 왜 봐요?
그냥 좀 봤다.
되게 신기하다.
뭐가?
얼마 전에도 어떤 아저씨가 여기서 이 구멍 속 들여다보고 있었는데. 그 아저씨한테도 물어봤었거든요. 왜 여기 들여다보냐고.
그랬더니?
뭐래더라? 맞아. 옛날에 여기서 자기가 했던 일이 생각나서 진짜 오랜만에 한번 와봤다. 그랬는데?
그 아저씨 얼굴 봤어? 어떻게 생겼어?
그냥 뻔한 얼굴인데?
어떻게?
그냥 평범해요.
Fast forward to January 1994. The Hwaseong killings had stopped, but Lee Chun-jae had moved to Cheongju, and there his dark urges resurfaced, close to home. His wife had left him, unable to bear his abuse. In a twisted act of revenge, Lee targeted his own sister-in-law. He drugged her with sleeping pills mixed into orange juice, sexually assaulted her, and then bludgeoned her to death with a hammer. When police found her body, it was wrapped in a blue tarp, bound with stockings and bag straps, the exact same signature as the Hwaseong murders. He had even covered her head with a plastic bag and jeans. Lee claimed the murder was accidental, a result of a fight, but the evidence screamed premeditation. The high dose of sleeping pills, the methodical binding, the way he cleaned the crime scene, it was the work of an experienced predator. He was sentenced to life in prison for this murder, but for 20 years, no one connected him to the Hwaseong cases. In prison, he was a model inmate. It wasn't until modern DNA analysis re-examined the cold case evidence that the truth came out. The DNA from the Hwaseong scenes matched the inmate serving life for the murder of his sister-in-law. Confronted with undeniable proof, the model prisoner's mask crumbled. Lee Chun-jae confessed. He admitted not just to the known Hwaseong murders, but to a total of 14 murders, 19 rapes, and over 15 sexual assaults. There is a chilling detail captured in a drawing he made during the interrogation. As you can see, he initially wrote 12 murders, then, as if realizing he missed some, he casually added a +2 to the count. He confessed to crimes in Suwon and Cheongju that police hadn't even linked to him. This case was one of the 3 major unsolved mysteries of South Korea, and after 33 years, they finally got the serial killer. But amidst this resolution, there is a tragedy within the tragedy. There was a man who was falsely charged for one of these murders. During the investigation of the 8th murder, the pressure was suffocating. With the 1988 Seoul Olympics on the horizon, the government was desperate for stability. President Roh Tae-woo took a special interest in the investigation, even promising special promotions to the officers who could solve it. Under this immense pressure, the police resorted to coercive interrogation tactics. They pinned the 8th murder on a 22-year-old man named Yoon Sung-yo, who suffered from polio. He was framed, wrongfully accused, and sentenced to life imprisonment. Yoon served 20 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. It wasn't until 2020, when Lee Chun-jae confessed to the 8th murder as well, that the truth finally came out. After a retrial, Yoon was declared innocent 32 years after the nightmare began. Can you believe that? 20 years in prison and living with the label of a murderer for 32 years. For decades, families lived in agony, and an entire nation lived in fear. While justice arrived late, the truth, no matter how horrific, was finally dragged into the light. The devil of Hwaseong wasn't a myth, he was a man, and now the world knows his face.